I actually think there are tasks within a marketing agency that will no longer exist.
AI is shifting the world of employment. AI will take your job.
We're entering phase 3 of the internet.
I believe there are certain tasks that may almost entirely disappear in 3 to 5 years, design being one of them. Elements of video production, I think, will disappear. Elements of copywriting will disappear. But there is always a place in the world for great thinking and great creativity.
It could go either way, where you have these tools that now make creating so much easier, right? However, it could also go the other way, where for brands to teach themselves how to use these tools, it's just too much thinking, it's too much work, so I'm actually going to outsource even more.
We're seeing now just the death of industry titans, and I genuinely think the world will be radically different. In this week's Memes and Machines, we dive into the future of marketing, the future of agencies, the future of media. Have we seen the end of traditional media as we know it? Is TikTok now at peak and in decline? We debate that topic. We dive into our favourite social platforms, and Catty may or may not mention Farcaster. More specifically, underrated social platforms that brands should pay attention to and deploy more resources against. And finally, we talk about often overlooked, but should never be underestimated, Pinterest. Why you as a brand should pay attention to Pinterest.
If you don't sign up to Farcaster by the end of this episode, then I'm going to say it again next week, and the week after, and the week after.
Use code CATMAN Farcaster to get your 10% discounts. Catman, good to see you. How you doing?
Doing very well. How's your week been, Ollie?
Good. It's been chaos. I say this every week. I sound like a broken record, but this week truly has been chaos. But an exciting week. I have talks, we have marketing recordings, we have big pitches, we have management meets. We're doing something, or we're about to start an internal exercise around the future of marketing and the future role of agencies, considering all the advancements in AI and other technologies. And the idea is I have strong opinions, but I want to find a forum for the rest of the business and try and synthesize as opposed to imposing my view on the topic. Because I fundamentally believe that marketing agencies will look very different. Not just marketing agencies, I think companies will look very different in 5 years. So we may as well ride the wave as opposed to resist it. So yeah, there's quite a lot of exciting things happening.
Interesting. And so how do you think the role of an agency will look different?
Oh, we're diving straight in. Role of
Why
agency. I actually think there are tasks within a marketing agency that will no longer exist. So there are things we currently do that we probably don't have to do because there is a technology that maybe does it faster and better and more efficient than we can at a lower cost. So in my view, I think that the role of an agency will more than likely embody something like today's consultancies. I think there is still going to be a need for strategic marketing advice. I think there will be an increased need for creativity, and not just creativity in your marketing, but thinking about creative solutions, thinking about creative ways to solve your own business problems. So my view is marketing agencies and consultancies will look awfully alike, but the things we do will probably be different. I believe there are certain tasks that may almost entirely disappear in 3 to 5 years, design being one of them. Elements of video production, I think, will disappear. I think elements of copywriting will disappear. But there is always a place in the world for great thinking and great creativity. So That's my initial stab. But again, the exercise we're going through internally is more one about finding a view from different perspectives, because we're multi-service. Naturally, how things may evolve in communication services will be very different to creative and performance and so on. So I don't think it's going to be a one shoe fits all answer. I think it is going to be nuanced. And saying all that, I think two things can be true. We will move incredibly quickly in one direction, but the way that businesses interact with each other may also move slowly. People don't change that quickly. That's something I'm actually excited to go into. The whole point of it is, the view is we want to disrupt ourselves, to not be romantic about how we've always done things. And it gets us thinking from first principles. But we can only do that if we go to the first principle, which is, firstly, where is marketing headed? Second question, what is the role of an agency in that future landscape? And then if we answer that, we can behave, we can adjust our process, our systems, our investments, where we think about nurturing talent, where we think about training, the types of clients we work with. All the answers that we should think about derive from having a strong point of view on those foundational questions.
Yeah, it feels like it could go either way, where you have these tools that now make creating so much easier, right? So it doesn't make sense for a brand to outsource that if they can do it in-house really cheaply. And instead, I'm going to outsource the third-party strategic thinking and the creative thinking. However, it could also go the other way, which I think is probably what will happen in the short term, where it's for brands to teach themselves how to use these tools and to get up to speed. It's just too much thinking, it's too much work. So I'm actually going to outsource even more. Like, you guys take care of the AI, you guys take care of that kind of process. And actually agencies make, better margins for a short period of time until the brands catch up and start to figure out how to do it in-house, which I think is what we saw with the social media kind of boom. I remember from when social change started to when we ended, the difference in level of the competency of the social media teams at these brands, right, was just so much higher towards the end of that kind of, 6 or 7 years. And then it was more of a kind of collaborative approach with the agency rather than this kind of completely outsource it. I don't have to think about it anymore. And so you're right. It's like it's a case of how the brands tend to lag a little bit behind, I think, the agencies, which it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
I couldn't agree more. I'd also say there's a nuance to when you say what type of business. And what I mean by that is, I think for small business, medium-sized scale-ups, this is a great leveler. You are not now bound by limited resources. You have human ingenuity at scale in the palm of your hand, right? So that suddenly is very much a great leveler in many respects. For big business, you have the opposite effect where, yes, you can do more, but doing more necessarily isn't the right thing. Doing more impactful work. And also a large business is bound by being slow, certainly not as agile, more processes, more risks. They can't make the decisions that a smaller company. So I actually think we'll see maybe a shift in power dynamics of who has advantages. And for a small emerging business, I think the next 10 years are going to be amazing. For incumbents, I don't know. I really don't know. And I've been asked this question a lot about what happens in a world where everything is hyper-personalized. So with generative AI, we are now capable of creating in real time creative that's bespoke to you, that you want, like, desire. What do we miss as advertisers in a world where everything's personalized? The things that bond us together, the stories that we can all resonate with. So when you factor that, small business, big business, new capabilities, agencies, clients, you then factor in all the behavioral change that is going to come along with innovation. And I genuinely think the world will be radically different. And to your point, the social media revolution democratized information and gave power to individuals, where individuals could become media institutions effectively. And look at all, two things happened. Social media destroyed many sectors and industries, but it also grew and gave a platform to so many others to thrive. And I only have to assume that the AI revolution will do the exact same thing, but maybe in a more extreme way. I think in a way, because what you have now is this multiplier of social media has changed the world. Well, the internet changed the world. Then social media changed the world in a more meaningful way. Now the AI revolution is the combination and a culmination of all those things. And suddenly things could look very different.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is like just more content. And that means that there's more low quality content. There's more of like the complete bottom of the barrel crap content. You're starting to see it if you scroll through TikTok or Reels. You'll sometimes see a video which is fully AI generated. It's like an AI back voice. It's got like AI images. And it might be like a story. It's usually like telling an old, like, I don't know, myth or an old like folk tale. And it's good enough to keep you watching, but it's, it's fairly low barrier. And as a result, I think we're also seeing a demand for higher quality content as well, like more curation, better, kind of better quality, more refined content. I think about this a lot with the rise of newsletters. Like newsletters seem to be having a moment right now. There's people growing, like we talked about, these kind of single person media companies. One example I'll give is a newsletter called Perfectly Imperfect, which is getting a lot of traction in the US. It's like got a bit of a kind of New York following as well. And it's a fairly simple concept, but it basically it interviews like a famous or cool person and managed to get some like big names. I think today was like the editorial director of GQ. They've had like actors, singers, celebrities in the past. And it's very, very simple. They interview them and ask them about their favorite things at the moment. So like their favorite artist, the favorite clothing brand they're wearing, the favorite TV show they're watching. And has like amassed this kind of cult audience, has 60,000 subscribers. And for me, that is like the response to the algorithm, right? Like people now no longer want to go to this kind of computer to tell us what to like and what to consume. And along with that, the amount of low quality content we're now being fed, like some of it not even generated by a human. They now actually want to be fed, bespoke. Like, what are the cool people listening to? What are the cool people doing? Which I think we're going to see more of that, because there is just this fear that my interests are going to be shaped by the machine. And yeah, I think newsletters, for some reason, they're having their moment, but I think it actually makes sense. It makes sense against the backdrop of like low quality content becoming more and more ubiquitous.
Bro, you've just described magazines.
Yeah, basically.
You literally just described GQ and Vogue. Listen, we're going to have a celebrity interview. Amazing. Celebrity interview. We're going to find out what they like, what they don't. It's going to be very well written.
But this is the thing. It's written by one person.
Yes, well, it doesn't have the baggage of the incumbent. And it's a really important point, actually, because we mentioned earlier about industries that are dying. We're seeing now just the death of industry titans. There was this kind of resurgence in media where traditional media became digital, video on demand. You had all these digital assets. And then you had the social media renaissance, which started to see the rise of social publishers, and you had these crazy valuations around social publishing houses. And then now, for the last several years, you've just seen this rapid decline, not just in valuations, but some of the darlings of yesteryear, the Vices of the world, going into bankruptcy and administration. And you're seeing this time and time again. What do you think of those dynamics? And is this telling for like, is this the death of media as we know it? And we're just going to have this fragmented newsletter creator-led media world?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I remember us being really in the center of this when we were kind of building social chain and media chain. We were building these media companies. I think BuzzFeed had just IPO'd. Vice was receiving like $1 billion valuation. I think partly what happened was they were just simply overvalued at the time. They were really seen as the next kind of, Condé Nast, the next, Sky Empire. And they relied heavily on their distribution through social channels, which, as we all know, isn't always necessarily sustainable. And they, I imagine, pivoted to their kind of subscription models probably too late. But at the end of the day, if you remember, BuzzFeed, I think Vice always had high quality, but I think it tapered off at the end. I remember the content always being, engagement first, right? It was, quizzes on which Harry Potter character you were, or it was, fairly kind of lowbrow meme style content. And I get the impression that just never really was going to sustain itself. But, when you're getting, I remember they had the BuzzFeed Tasty Facebook page that was hitting like tens of millions of views on every single video. It was just this crazy, you think about like the crypto booms. It was this crazy, like, meteoric rise where everybody just thought, oh my God, we're going to be printing money forever. And then, of course, the algorithms, they change, they whip the rug out from under you and everything crashes. And I think what we've seen is, in general, with the rise of creators, with the improvements in kind of hardware, which makes it easier for anyone to be a creator, right? All of that attention that used to go to these kind of media entities is now distributed across, I don't go to BuzzFeed Fashion anymore. I go to 10, 20 solo creators, because then, their opinions and their interests are kind of distributed. I'm not like focused towards one entity. And I think that's just a better way to get your opinions and get your news and get your updates. And so I think it's really interesting. I think it's a combination of like inflated valuations, which eventually could sustain. And now the media landscape looks very, very different, where people aren't as bothered about consuming media from a trusted source. They trust other people. They trust creators. And now, why would I go to BuzzFeed? Why would I go to Vice to consume this kind of content?
You're right. There are several conflating factors. When you look at the data, trust in media is at an all-time low. And that's been eroded by, I think American media is really, really been detrimental. In Britain, we have the tabloids and the kind of News Corp-esque end of that. But you would argue in Britain you have a free press to a degree.
Yeah.
Certainly with certain skews and bias. But nothing like what happens in the US, which is every media entity is a side, left or right, and everything is politicized. And as a consequence, just media trust is at an all-time low. Combine that then with just the challenging dynamics of old business models meets new market. That equally doesn't work. The days where someone would pay £5 for a carefully curated magazine and they could sell that ad space at a maximum premium, they had the distribution. That was great business 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Now that doesn't work because we have an abundance of content, we have an abundance of choice. You mentioned creators. Now the gatekeepers have all disappeared. Information is democratized in a new way. Algorithms play a huge role. And the environment often dictates how we behave. So yeah, I think it's just a combination of many factors all conflating together to just say, to your point, maybe the new way is better. We can complain about it. I would say the downside to me is truth. I think in all of this, we lose truth and we exist in echo chambers. And I think putting the agency on the individual to carefully curate their digital diet is a big ask at a societal level. Then again, is that any worse than being spoon-fed a narrative? I'm not sure, right? It's like, pick your side.
Well, I agree, and for me, it's journalism that's really suffering from all of this. I think the problem, you have like, again, these businesses that aren't able to sustain, junior journalists now. Who there aren't really many options, and I think, like you said, journalism being distributed towards solo creators, probably isn't. There are some short-term wins there, but probably long-term for truth and for quality of information. There are no structures, there are no rules. It feels a bit of a kind of Wild West situation where we're not going to get access to kind of high quality, high class journalism at the scale that we were previously, because the number of people laid off by Vice, the number of people laid off by Buzzfeed is like unprecedented, and so it's going to be interesting to see where that whole industry goes.
Yeah. I will actually give credit to Elon Musk, who I believe may have come up with a solution. I think community notes is probably something. I think there's a lot of value in democratized truth seeking. And obviously it's an extension of what Reddit became famed for. Upvoting, is this accurate? Is this interesting? And maybe we can self-govern truth, right? I actually think these things are big, important questions when you consider what the debates around real and fake and generative capabilities and all of these things. I don't know if you saw this week, there was basically LinkedIn has gone wild for some event in Scotland that claimed to be like Willy Wonka, and they were charging £35 to come to this experience, and all they did was clearly go onto ChatGPT and type in Willy Wonka, generate an image of Willy Wonka. And it set an expectation. And people showed up to this event. And basically the police were called. It was called fraud. Think Fyre Fest, but the Scottish version of that. For a children's experience at £35. And it was this kind of like shocking event. Firstly, I suppose the question I'd love to get your take on is, we speak often from a place of generative AI being great for small business, but this is an example where it's clearly a misuse of the technology. What do you think of it? And are there lessons to be learned in this whole fiasco?
I feel like it's the golden age for scammers. And that was the first example I've seen where, I think we spoke about it a few weeks ago, where we said, for us who are obsessed with this kind of stuff, we're chronically online. We've kind of developed the model to detect AI art quite easily. It's very kind of instantly, you just know that's AI, that's art driven. In this case, it's very, very likely these parents had no idea that the marketing material that they saw, and this is the thing, people are saying it's AI, so they should have known that. They should have been suspicious of the whole thing. However, even further than that, there were no pictures of the actual thing they were going to. They were very clearly not photographs. So that should have been a real red flag enough, let alone how the images themselves are generated. But yeah, what we're seeing is, to many people, when I saw those, when I actually went on the website and I clicked around, and it is just complete, every single image you see is AI generated and very badly done. It's obviously like one of the earlier mid-journey models. It's not even remotely good. And, as a result, I immediately associate that with low budget, low quality. This person spent 5 minutes on this. It's probably going to be a trash scam experience. But actually, on the other side of the coin, if you didn't know that AI existed, you'd probably look at this and think, it might not be the most polished, but someone has at least spent time to create these images, or they've licensed them or whatever. Like, there is some brand identity here, and therefore there's probably some legitimacy behind this organization. And I think it's the first time we've seen this where, people are going to get scammed by this kind of stuff. But I don't know what the lessons here are. There needs to be some kind of guidelines, I think, for people to understand like how to read this stuff better in the future. And maybe it'll come through these moments of learning. Maybe we're just in the Wild West right now.
The funny thing is, right, that experience, I think the lesson for me is, regardless of your promotion, your marketing efforts, if you have a shit product or service, you will fail.
Yeah.
And just because you now have a creative tool to aid your imagination does not mean that you can defraud people and set unrealistic expectations. The foundation of any experience or service is kind of do what you say, right? So I think there's maybe a more simple foundational business lesson, but I am very interested in the debate. And I actually think as more and more of these examples, it happened a few weeks ago when the delivery company DPD integrated a chatbot into their customer service app, and it was basically a direct plugin of OpenAI, and people would game the chatbot. So they couldn't get the information they needed, like where is my parcel? So they started to play with the chatbot and say, trick it into self-roasting and doing a poem and saying why DPD is so bad. And then people create content around that, and it suddenly becomes a big story, and the company goes into panic, etc. I think this is just another example. So I don't think even if you are an offline person, like my nan has asked me about AI. So it's making its way onto Good Morning Britain every couple of days now. So I do think, in essence, these mistakes that we are stumbling our way through, there will probably be a healthy awareness. And like, what's the real damage? You know, it's not the first time that you've overpaid for an experience for your family.
Yeah,
I'm sure. So, you know, harsh lessons and all that, which is good. Dude, I read an article this week, actually. And it caught my attention because it was juxtaposed to a very common narrative. I seem, as a marketing agency, we seem to spend the majority of our time speaking to brands about TikTok and how to build a TikTok strategy and how to be effective and grow TikTok and TikTok shop, all these moving pieces. And this article said, I'm calling it now, TikTok is in decline. And basically it lays out a case for all these factors that are working against TikTok. Firstly, think about the political sentiment in the US, the anti-China narrative that exists and how that's been politicized. And you'll see the CEO of TikTok be put under Congress and be asked some very difficult questions. You also have then, more recently in the news, the battle with Universal, whereby they removed the music catalogue. They couldn't come to terms. And all the Universal artists were being pulled. So tons of content now doesn't have music libraries supporting it. You have all this influencer drama. You have people speaking about the creator revenue share programs. They've all ended. People are complaining about ad load and how much now their experience has been hindered. The question I have for you is, have we hit peak TikTok? And what does this mean for brands?
I think it sounds like, and I haven't read the article, but it sounds like, it sounds like a good headline. But I would imagine that TikTok dying is probably just their growth is slowing. And this is honestly, one of the fastest growing companies, fastest growing private companies, at least in the world, one of the fastest growing social networks. So there was inevitably going to be a point where that kind of growth slowed. But what I will say is that anything that grows that quickly and through, not necessarily the most kind of, it was definitely organic growth, but they also did a lot of kind of paid marketing, paid advertising. There is always going to be this kind of like peak and this trough as well. And while you also have this kind of, constant narrative with this political influence, and is it a kind of, weapon by the Chinese government to, make US kids stupider. There's all these like crazy narratives that are coming off the back of it. And I think that just makes TikTok this target, right? It's always going to be a target for people to kind of take down. But there are creators on there who have, like all great new social networks, like YouTube in the past, Instagram. There are creators who have built their lives, built these, crazy followings and audiences that are now sustaining into long-term careers, long-term media businesses. Like you have TikTokers in the same way you have YouTubers. You don't really have like Twitter people tweet, you don't really have like, Instagrammers, I guess, but that's more of a kind of,
you have
more
Twitter
of a,
folk. They have newsletters. That's Twitter folk.
Exactly. So but you don't hear it like you hear TikToker. And so I think I think it's difficult for a platform like that to die when you have creators who are so ingrained in the platform. They have built communities. They are gonna, carry that platform through whatever. I really think it will always have a place as a result of that. Now, what I do contest is, TikTok has this vision of being this all-in-one app where people are shopping, people are live streaming. I'm still not convinced in that execution. And, from what I've seen for TikTok Shop, it tends to really be the kind of lower quality, lower brow products. I haven't seen like really great meaningful adoption beyond that. And so there may be, I'd say, probably some unfavorable stats that TikTok will look at in terms of their growth. And then the final thing I'll say is, I don't have TikTok installed on my phone. Like I refuse to have it installed on my phone because it is so addictive. And it just when I do have it on my phone, the occasions that I'll download it because I need it for work or something, man, it just like the time just evaporates. And I really believe that if I had it installed over the last year, I'd probably have lost like 5-10% of my output. And so like, that's the only bear case I have for TikTok is that if people really realize how time consuming and damaging it is to your attention span and your focus and your productivity, that's the only reason I can see it dying. However, that's giving too much credit to people who I don't think give a fuck about that. They just want to be entertained, and TikTok is the fastest route to entertainment available right now.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with it stealing our attention. I'm sure for decades gone by, people would sit in front of a TV and waste a lot of time. And like, waste is subjective. I think it comes from a place of who are we to judge how people spend their time? I do believe there are concerns around how children interact and how it can influence the developmental years of all our lives. I think obviously there are natural concerns there. Anything that is as sticky as TikTok. But yeah, I agree. I tend to think these articles as headline grabbing, and as much as it caught my attention, I read it and just went, if I go to the average person in the street that obsesses and spends too much time on TikTok, they aren't thinking about this stuff. It's such a cultural phenomenon, and it has such an influence over our language, our vernacular, the products we like, the products we buy. It's influence in media. It's kind of now this catalyst in the same way that, online conversations used to start in a forum in Reddit and then make their way onto Twitter or then make their way onto other parts of the internet. TikTok is now that. Content stories, news, theories. People are solving crimes on TikTok before the police. Like these kind of these kind of echo chambers that exist on the internet, and it is a wild and wonderful place. So yeah, I think if you are a brand, you should still more than likely, and you should never talk in absolutes, but most individuals that want to grow an online presence and most brands won't go far wrong if they spend at least half their time figuring out TikTok. That's probably decent, sound marketing advice.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Segue, social platform. We talk about TikTok. I think we cover YouTube a lot. What's the most underrated social media platform in your view, and why?
That's underrated. I'm tempted to say Farcaster, but I think that's very specific to my industry.
No, but Farcaster is like wildly underrated because no one's heard of it.
No one has heard of it, you're right. But I would say its own, like, I don't want to sit here on a general marketing point and say everybody should be on Farcaster, because I don't think that's true.
Who should be on Farcaster then? Give me a view. Who's on Farcaster? If you're targeting developers or you are in Web3?
Basically, so if you're a technical creator, right? So if you're somebody who is writing code and also creating content, it's an amazing place to be because the concentration of builders is so high. But also if you're a venture capitalist, if you're an investor, if you're somebody who wants to be on the cutting edge of internet products, not just Web3, but outside of Web3, it is the highest concentration of builders, of thinkers, of doers, of any other social platform, because there is no other noise. I don't know if I've talked about this, but the most, in my opinion, one of the most interesting features of Farcaster is the channels. So what they've basically done is they've taken like the subreddit model and applied that to a Twitter-like feed. So you have your feed, obviously, that people follow you, but you also, every time you post something, you post into a channel. So you might post into the founders channel, which is a channel full of, founders, people who are building stuff. You might post into football. You want to talk about football. You might post into front-end development. You can go super niche, right, into other categories. And what you do is you're not just posting to your audience, you're posting to the followers of that channel, which can sometimes be 50, 60,000 people. And so you're able to get this like crazy distribution on content that, exposes your profile to this new audience of people. So, people build their audiences because they become very well known for posting in the, front end development channel, or for posting in the design channel, or for posting in the whatever. There's obviously like, channels for walking, there's channels for, mountain biking, skiing, this is everything. And so that crossover of subreddits and the feed, I think is the most interesting product development I've seen. And, like I said, whilst Farcaster right now is incredibly niche, it tends to be people who are building on Web3 and blockchain, and also the kind of people around those. So like, people who are building other kind of futuristic tech like AI, like virtual reality, like augmented reality, but also VCs. I do think in the future, if it starts to grow and starts to get outside those bubbles, it's going to be a really, really interesting place for brands, because there are some growth loops that I haven't seen in other channels yet. So that is my underrated platform.
Shocker. Farcaster, you heard it here for the 5th time, folks. Have you seen our brands or companies doing anything interesting in Farcaster? Because appreciate as an individual, if you want to cultivate an audience, new platforms are always interesting territory. But are you seeing any companies do anything interesting?
Yeah, so it's I like any new platform, it's quite averse to brand pages right now. So if you're a brand page, tends not to be what people want to see. The engagement's fairly low. They want to hear from the founders. They want to hear from the builders. Yeah. But what brands are doing and are having success doing is setting up channels for their brand. So if I'm like a brand, or I'm a tool, or whatever I am, and I have a community of people that want to talk about my product, instead of them following me, I create a channel, which is like a subreddit. Yeah. And they can use that channel to meet other people who are in your ecosystem and talk with other people who care about your product. And that's actually the opportunity. What you're seeing is brands having much larger channels than they have followers on their homepage. And those channels are usually driven by individuals, by the founders, by the kind of senior builders. And so it's a slightly different model, but that's where I'm seeing brands moving.
Similar to, this is going to show my age, but Facebook groups. If you were advising a brand, you'd pick around a passion, and you as a brand would almost try and cultivate conversation or contribute, but fundamentally it was community driven. It was bottom up. You just gave the platform, maybe brought in some assets. So if you had partnerships or celebrities, you'd have them contribute. You may do giveaways, that type of thing.
Exactly.
it's almost that these spaces are, so pure and so authentic that brands haven't ruined them yet. But give it a year, dude. Wait till I get hold of them. Wait till we're dropping Farcaster strategies for our clients, and we're hijacking your attention.
What's your most underrated platform?
Pinterest.
Yeah.
Pinterest, because to this day,
because you invested in it.
I haven't. I did invest at Pinterest at a very favorable price. This is not me shilling a stock right now. It's actually me saying it's underrated for two reasons. It has always baffled me that the platform that people use as part of that most lucrative, important psychological journey that you go on as a buyer. Pinterest is a visual search platform. When I'm looking for an event, when I'm looking for inspiration, when I'm looking to pair things, I go to Pinterest. I am in a buyer discovery mindset. And if you consider that as marketeers, we're always trying to go through the back door of attention. Hey, cute meme over here. Have a laugh. But really, I want to sell you some shoes. That's been the back door. You have a active community and a big one of regular users that go there looking for inspiration to buy shit. And also, it rarely ever makes its way onto a brand's media plan, or it's an afterthought as part of a campaign. It's not a staple as Meta and Google. So I would argue underpriced attention. And it isn't as competitive for brands because they're not deploying the same amount of energy as they are in other places. They only have so many chips to place, and very few brands are placing any chips on Pinterest. And there is a creator economy that hasn't matured and isn't overpriced like, say, YouTube. If I want to work with a notable YouTuber, I have to pay serious premiums to access their attention. Instagram has matured to the point where probably attention with creators is largely overpriced. TikTok is getting there. There are some ludicrous fiascos when you want to work with TikToks. There are probably two spaces where you can get underpriced attention because the supply and demand dynamics aren't quite level. It's probably LinkedIn if you need business creators, and Pinterest. So for all of the above, I think Pinterest is wildly overlooked and probably a huge unlock if you sell homeware, if you're in fashion, if you do anything very specific, like your business is built around bridal events, baby showers, any food, you name it. I just think there's certain categories that should spend a lot more time paying attention to Pinterest.
That makes so much sense. I guess you're the closest to the purchase, the point of purchase, right? I think I love that. Going through the back door of attention is how every other platform does it. This is literally, buy my thing. People are looking for products. It's super interesting.
Yeah, they're looking for products. They're looking for inspiration. And guess what? Imagine people are saving your shit. Think of the feed format. If I see something that inspires me, I'm renovating my home, I will have a board that's curated in part by brands, but individuals as well, of things that I like the look of. And I will keep that there when I'm ready to buy. I'm basically creating shopping lists for the future. So, if you can't as a marketeer see that as an opportunity, then I think you're missing a trick. And I would argue that performance agencies should pay more attention trying to understand Pinterest and understand mastery. Performance agencies will typically, and I think the role of a performance agency is changing. Typically, it would be effectively an online media buyer. They would place ads better. Now, the machines and the algorithms do a better job than individuals do of optimizing relevant content. So now it's more of a creative art. It's about creating enough creative variety. give it 2 years and creative variety will again be done by machines. So then really strong performance agencies are looking for opportunities like Pinterest, strategy, thinking, pulling together these pieces. So yeah, I'm a big Pinterest fan. And I also think we probably should at Flight Story do like a white paper on it as I'm speaking this out, because I think people would find it interesting. Really break down how do you be successful on Pinterest.
Cool.
Dude, my battery's about to die and I can't be bothered to go get a charger. So I think that's the end of memes and machines.
I'm on 7%, so that works for me.
Oh, you're flexing. Let me see what I'm on. Oh, 9. There we go. Look at this guy, 9%. On that note, dude, I did have a note for us to talk about raising investment, building an equity story. But let's save this for next week, because I actually think it's a topic that I hope many people will be interested in. Yeah, we'll dive in deep. Cool. Good chatting, dude, and I'll chat to you next week.
See you, man.